Welcome to Gatecrashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, and our code is this: to make all things more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe that you'll fall in love with. So, the DC universe is healing after the Dark Crisis and the Lazarus Reign, but it's okay because we've actually headed into a new dawn, the dawn of DC, with a lot of cool new titles. You may have heard our last interview about Doom Patrol, but today... The last time I got to speak with this person was right before the beginning of the Dark Crisis. And today, Joshua is back for our third chat together about the DC Universe and the current titles, Superman, which is out now with #1 going back for a second printing, and the upcoming Green Arrow series that drops in April. Joshua, how are you?
I'm good. That was great. I'm excited that you interviewed Dennis about Doom Patrol.
I did. I'm very excited about Doom Patrol.
Yeah. Dennis is one of my closest friends, and that book is very cool. So I'm glad you guys talked to him.
That one was when I was like, "Hey, can I get this and like get it out as soon as possible?"
Yeah, it's really cool. But
it rules.
I'm good. As you can tell, I'm as we discussed before, I'm always very busy doing a lot of stuff, but things are really good. I'm having fun.
Yeah, it's this is actually the first time we've done an interview since we got to meet in person, which was wild.
Oh yeah. I mean, you saw, New York Comic Con was weird because I feel like I was only really there for 2 days, and I had so much I had to do in those 2 days. But also, we were announcing Superman, and I was very excited about announcing Superman while we were there. But it was also weird because it was like we were announcing Superman, and then I was literally leaving the convention center to get on a plane to come home, like the moment the panel was over. So I had this like ticking clock in my brain over the entire weekend of like, we were going to a wedding. My wife and I were going to a wedding in Seattle. And I was so nervous about somehow missing a flight or having some kind of problem. And I was like, so that entire the entire New York experience, I was like a little on edge the entire time. So I'm glad we got to meet in person there though.
Yeah.
I feel like I was like, my brain was like 50% at the convention and then 50% in Seattle for a wedding.
So it's a lot of travel.
It was. Oh man. Yeah. That was a fun one. It was fun.
Yeah. So we got to the Dark Crisis. How do you feel post getting to write a crisis? Do you feel like you've accomplished everything you wanted to with that event?
You know, it's weird. Like when I was getting closer and closer to the ending, and this is sort of true of, I think, any big project you work on, you start seeing the things you would do differently. And I think with Dark Crisis, like, and this actually be a thing we could talk about with Night Terror too, is that I've always been an advocate for faster, quicker events. But then when I did Dark Crisis, we announced it in January. The actual Dark Crisis event started in June. But there was so much build up to it. You know, we did all the minis, we did Death of Justice League, all this was building into it. If I could go back, it's like, I think those are things I would change about it is it make it move faster in terms of publishing release schedule. However, it should have been 12 issues long, because it's like, once I started getting into the back half of it, I started just compressing in places where in the first few issues, I was able to let it breathe a lot more and let it build a bit more. By the time I got to the ending, I was just like, picking and choosing, and this is where the origin of Green Arrow comes from, because it was like some of the stuff with the Green Arrow family and giving the Green Arrow family a reunion, that stuff I wanted to do in Dark Crisis, and then we just ran out of room. You know, it was just like, I could do it in 2 panels or I could do it in a series, and it was like, obviously we chose a series, but I think that's the thing about it that I would change about it, is that otherwise, I feel I'm proud of it. I think the work that Daniel did in it is amazing. I think all the stuff he did in that book, it looks really great.
It's beautiful.
I got to say what it was that I was trying to say about DC, which is that like, it's at its best when we're embracing legacy and we're embracing all the pieces that we love, and then we're not going deep into the darkness of it, Actually, there's this, I'll send it to you. There's this retailer. I think the name of his comic store is Variant Comics, and he actually wrote a whole thing explaining his thoughts on Dark Crisis leading into Dawn of DC. It was in his newsletter, And when I read it, I was like, oh, this is it. Bingo. Like, this is this person like totally got what we were doing. I'll send it to you. It was really,
I'd love to read that.
It was really interesting to read from a retailer's perspective, you know, and I sent it over to DC and they really understood that what we were trying to say with that ending. And then it led into Dawn of DC, which it's like, DC doesn't need to be dark and gritty. It needs to be hopeful and full of legacy. And that was what I really wanted to say with the ending of it. So I got to say stuff with it. We got to tease the stuff we're doing with Dawn and DC. So all of that really worked out. But it's like, and I talk about it's funny, like there's only really a small handful of people who have written crisis events. And talking with them, everyone has the same opinion on it. Like the same thing. They all look at it and are like, I know what I would do differently. Like every single one of them kind of walk away from it with that. And so once I found that out, I was like, yes, this is just the way it is. But also I didn't have a lot of time to dwell on it because I was already working on Superman. We were already working on Night Terrors. Like I was already working on it. Yeah. Before we got to the ending, I was already writing stuff and developing Night Terror before I wrote issue 7. Like I was already putting stuff together. Like I hadn't written the very beginning of it, but I was already outlining, I was already whiteboarding, like all this stuff for Night Terrors already. And then, and then there was Green Arrow. Like in Green Arrow, we had originally Green Arrow, like I told you, we had thought about it being Dark Crisis, Green Arrow Room. Then we were like, well, what if we did a Green Arrow one shot that kind of wraps it up? And then it was like, it's not working. And eventually we decided on doing the Green Arrow series.
Yeah.
But I didn't have time. I don't have time to dwell on stuff too long. I got too many deadlines.
Yeah. You never stop.
No.
Yeah. So you brought it up because our first conversation really dug into the legacy, because that's what this book seemed like it was going to be. And it really was, with Nightwing taking the forefront pretty much of the DC universe as we know it right now. What kind of stage can we expect for the younger generations moving into the dawn of DC? Are they still going to have this big stage for them, or is it going to just go back to the Trinity?
No. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Trinity is still going to be a major player, and you're going to start seeing a little bit more of this with Tom when Tom's Titans book launches in May. There's definitely some pieces involving those characters, and obviously, the John Kent book. The new number 1 comes out next week, right? So it's like, I think it's next week. No, those characters aren't just going to like disappear or anything like that. Like we do have plans for them, and you'll start to see it and where they're at. I definitely looked at that as we got closer to the ending, and it was something I kind of threw out to editorial too, and we're having conversations with them of just like, you can't leave. This was a thing that's been going on for years and years and years and years, right? People create a new character, and then they go homeless at some point, right? Like they go homeless at some point. And so that was something with all of the new characters have been created over the last like 5-10 years. That was definitely part of the conversation of like, okay, where do they go next? Right? Like, where does this character go here? Where does it go there? And there definitely are conversations about that and making sure they don't just disappear. I mean, even like when Yara's series ended, then she was in Wonder Woman, so it's like,
and all the Batman characters from Tynans are still around.
Yeah, exactly. And so John will obviously be around, and there are other plans for other big pieces. It's just too early to talk about them. It's like,
interesting.
I think post Dark Crisis, we definitely wanted to get back. I mean, look at how Superman is, right? Like this is the way the my Superman book is. It's like, get back to, I only like saying get back because I don't like the idea of going backwards, right? I still don't like the idea of going backwards. So it's like, all right, so we're showing you again, here is the core of it. Here are all the pieces. Here's all those things you love about these characters. And then let's keep that ball going forward, right? Like we have to keep it going forward. And so we wanted to look at a few pieces that we felt needed that, so that was stuff like Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Titans. Those were things that we needed to get back on the table, right? And so those are the stuff that we're starting off with this year. And then when you start looking at some of those other parts that you're talking about, there is a plan for those pieces to start getting them back on the table as well.
So before we move to Superman, last time we talked, you were writing Robin. That series wrapped, but Damian has been a huge part of all the events, the Lazarus, Batman, what is it, Batman v Robin. Being that Damian is the best Robin, does he have a place in the dawn of DC? Without getting into any spoilers.
Yes. My baby boy is just fine.
Good.
He is safe and fine. I promise you. Like obviously, Batman versus Robin just came out this week. And you can see that this is a spoiler if anyone hasn't listened, if you haven't read Batman versus Robin, but it's like Bruce and Damian have been reunited. And you'll see fairly soon where Damian goes.
Yeah. Good,
he's safe.
good.
He's good.
All right.
He's good. He's not going anywhere.
I just want you
He's
to know that's on you.
Connected to
Like,
stuff.
no matter who writes it, if Damian is hurt while you're there, I'm coming to you. So
no, he's good. He's good. He'll be good, and you'll see pretty soon.
So you've got Superman now. Superman #1 came out in the past couple of weeks, and it's already gone back to print.
Yep.
Now, you've been on the show a couple times, so I couldn't ask you our normal hard-hitting sandwich question to open this, but I do know that you and I have a very similar interest. So I want to know your thoughts on who you think Superman's favorite AEW wrestlers would be.
I knew you were going to ask this. I knew you were going to ask that. As soon as you started saying we have some interest, I was like, oh, he's going to ask me what's Clark's favorite wrestler.
Yep.
Well, actually, what I thought you were going to ask me was what was the wrestler who was the most like Clark? Dude, that is a very hard question. Like, if Clark's sitting here watching AEW, who is the one that he pops for? Oh, man. That. You know what? I'm going to say Bryan Danielson.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Bryan Danielson. I think this person who is incredibly hardworking, but is so pure-hearted, you know, and I think that Clark would be like, that's my guy, you know, like, I think he definitely has done a yes chant at some point in his life. Like, I definitely think Bryan Danielson is the one. Because it's funny, because these questions are always funny, because it's not my opinion. It's not who do I like, right? It's like, who would Clark, if I was sitting next to Clark on a couch, and our opinions might be very different, because I might be like, oh, man, this MJF, man, so much fun. And he'd be like, no, dude, I don't like this guy. You know? Like, I feel like that is a little bit of how Clark is, you know? I mean, I'm trying to think, like, who else is somebody in my brain with Clark? I'm a little behind. It's funny. I'm caught up on the dirt sheets. I'm a little behind on watching. Like, I know what's going on. I know a little bit of stuff here and there. You know, it's like, would he like Kenny Omega? You know, would he? I don't know if he would like Kenny Omega. Yeah, I think Bryan Danielson's the answer. I think that's the guy that he would be like, that's the one. And I think some of the younger characters, I think he would definitely younger wrestlers, I think he would definitely be like, that one's good, you know. But I have to be careful with that, because I have to, like, again, it's not my opinion. You know, I might be like, oh, this is somebody, you know, like Darby Allin, right? Like, if I was on the couch with Clark and I see Darby Allin, I'd be like, hell yeah, dude, this guy's got it. And then Clark might be like, that young man is going to hurt himself. You know, like, somebody should take care of him, you know?
Or the old man doing the flips. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think Clark would definitely look at it like Sting, and he probably would have respect for Sting, you know?
Love that.
You know, I think, because Clark is such a, like, Clark's always a little old school in his heart, you know, like, and I thought about this a lot when I was working on him. Like, I had to remind myself, and I think it's a part of Clark that people forget, is that Clark grew up on a farm, until he was 18 years old. You know, like, he has a country boy inside of him. You know, this is a dude who drove a tractor, you know, and he spent a lot of time in the field. And so I think there's definitely some, you know, one of my best friend, he's a farmer. He comes from a family of farmers. And so being around him, he worked in comics for a little bit, but actually last year he went back to being a farmer, like, full on living on the farm, being a farmer all the time. And so having that person in my life, like, the majority of my life, I know a lot about the life of what a farmer is like, and kind of what the sensibilities they all kind of have, you know, because that's its own culture. And so I thought about that a lot when I was working on Clark. And so Clark, I always think, will have a little bit of a older. Okay, here's somebody. Adam Page.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow, that's a really good answer.
Yeah, I think that's somebody. I think that Clark would definitely like Adam Page. Who else? Hold on.
I knew this one would get you. I was like, Clark is from he's a Midwestern country. Like, he would watch wrestling. Like, it makes sense.
Yeah. No, he definitely. But yeah, I think that, you know, I'll say those, because I definitely think that, like, you know, Clark has said cowboy shit at some point in his life, but definitely, like, under his breath, blocked it out. And then
Yeah.
Pa Kent was like, not in front of your mother, you know, like
now that,
you know,
that is something I want to ask about. Are Ma and Pa, are they alive currently?
yeah, they're alive. Yeah.
So are they going to factor into your story at all?
Yeah. I don't know when I'm going to get to it. I don't want to get to it. You know, it's rough with Superman. It's like I have so many ideas for this book, like many ideas, and a lot of my ideas are you know, I obviously have like the big superhero ideas, right? Like big superhero ideas. And then I got Lex Luthor ideas, and I got Clark ideas, and Lois and Jimmy, and Daily Planet ideas. And then I have like, I want Ma and Pa Kent to take a trip to Metropolis, you know, for an issue kind of ideas, you know, and it's like, you know, there are a lot of stuff I want to get to, but yeah, Ma and Pa Kent. They'll definitely be in the book. They're not going to be in the book for a bit. And I probably won't have them in the book. Yeah, probably not until the second half of this year at the earliest. You know, Like there's other stuff I have to get to, and we have a lot of ground to cover. And then also I'm doing these. All of my Superman arcs are shorter, right? Like they're going to be. My A plots are short. Like when I was on Flash, my A plots were usually about 6 issues on average. You know, so it'd be like. This is Gorilla Grodd. Actually, Gorilla Grodd was like 8 issues long. So it's like, here's Gorilla Grodd for 8 issues. And then it was like, here's the Trickster for 5 issues. And then it was, here's the Rogues for 6 issues. You know, like I did that. But with this one, I've been very much just like, no. My A plots are going to be shorter, right? So like my first 3 issues is one arc. You know, it's like one introduction to this massive story I want to tell. But then my next arc after that is only 2 issues. And then it's like, you know.
I dig that.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm trying to keep it. Well, yeah, but it's like, okay, well, here's Silver Banshee for 2 issues. You know, it's like, here's this other character we'll do later. And then it's like, oh, no, we're going to do this one. Like, we're going to have Clark do this other crazy adventure for 1 issue. But the B plots and the C plots are going to continue. And the D plots, obviously, and the stuff with him and Lex will go on. And some of the Daily Planet stuff, it's going to build in a very different way. Like, I'm definitely not writing this for the trade in any way, shape, or form. I think it's going to frustrate, you know, people who... they want the trade. Like, don't get me wrong, the trade's be out there but beautiful. But like I'm not writing it in that format. Like I'm trying to move a little quicker with it. And so that's gonna allow me to introduce new characters and have more villains moving faster through the book. But it's gonna be a different experience, I think. With
those shorter kind of like shorter arcs and things like that, do you find that easier to balance the level of power Superman has against an enemy without just escalating all the time?
Yeah. Superman is so fascinating to me because it's like, and you know, are you familiar? I learned this term recently. So I'm going to ask you if you're familiar with this term. Are you familiar with the term power scaling?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people have the Goku Superman debate. So that's usually what comes up.
I didn't realize how intense it was until the last few years, but you know, that is a whole thing. I have never been that kind of person because I'm like, what's the difference of Superman lifting 100 million pounds versus a billion pounds or whatever, right? Like, what is the difference at that point? Like, once you get Superman to a certain level of strength, there's no real difference, you know?
Yeah.
And so I never really concerned myself so much with like his powers all the time, you know? It's like, I'm always so much more interested in his heart and how he actually handles the situation, right? Like, you know, there's a 3-issue arc coming down the line. It'll come later this year where I put Clark in an impossible situation. And it doesn't matter how strong he is or how powerful he is in this impossible situation. It comes down to a choice. Like Clark has to make an impossible choice. And then, of course, because he's Clark, he's Superman, you know, he will come up with a new choice. Like, and so it's stuff like that I think is way more it's more interesting with him and more powerful to write about. But yeah, it's like, you know, you can only have so many issues of Superman punching somebody, you know, or him heat visioning. And don't get me wrong, but it's like, I want to make it so those moments when they happen are bigger, you know? It isn't so much about just like, yeah, I don't know. I don't get too caught up in that, but yeah, but also just allows me to have a little more fun. And I think you can tell reading that first issue, like we're really influenced by the animated series. And so I always think of like the animated series is like, you know, it's 20 minutes long. And so it's like, to me, our first 3 issues are like a 40-minute episode, you know? And then it's like, that's why these shorter arcs are built like that, you know? And so it's really weird. Actually, by doing shorter arcs, it's actually letting us breathe more. because I don't know. It's been interesting so far, and I get to cover more ground. And like Philip Kennedy Johnson and I last night were texting each other, and we were talking about stuff that's like not going to happen until like issue 11 and 12.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going back and forth on that stuff, and I was explaining some of the stuff to him. And it's like, man, it's so crazy the amount of ground I'm going to cover in the first year.
Yeah.
Whereas then when I did Flash, the first year, I literally did 2 story arcs. I did Godspeed and I did The Shade, and that was it, you know?
Damn.
And with this one, it's going to be like, I mean, our first 3 issues, I have Lex. We introduced a new anti-hero. We introduced 2 new villains. We have Parasite and Livewire all in the first 3 issues. And
it's a lot in 3 issues.
Yeah, but it's really interesting. Like, looking at issue 3, I'm like, man, we just did it. I don't know. It just works really well. We still get like to have romantic moments between Clark and Lois, you know, and I get to have
those are awesome.
Yeah, I get that stuff with the family. You know, there's some stuff in issue 3 with Clark and Lois with the rest of the family, and
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, we
got
just
to read
get
issue
to cover
2.
this ground.
Rules.
Oh, cool, good. Yeah, you're the first person to read issue 2 then. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, it rules. Good. So Jamal Campbell, an unbelievable look for Superman. But
yeah, I know.
His Clark may be my favorite I've ever seen, because he is still, when he is sitting at his desk, he's massive. He's still a big dude.
Yeah, big dude.
Was that a conversation that you two had about how Clark would actually just kind of be a big person no matter what?
Yeah, well, so he and I feel I've been very lucky the last few of all the artists I've worked with, you know, that already have passion for the characters. They're not coming into it blind, you know, like they are coming in with their own opinions and their own like desires and goals. So I wrote this like long, like 10-page document of just like, not even here's what's happening. Not even here's what's happening in the book. Here are my thoughts on the book. You know what I mean? It wasn't like issue 1, issue 2, issue 3. That wasn't what the document was. It was just like, here's a bunch of information. And before I even sent it to him, Jamal and I got on a call, and we just talked about it. And we just talked about a bunch of stuff. It was great, because we were like, oh, okay, we're already on the same page before this call even started. You know, it was like what he wanted, I wanted, what I wanted, he wanted. And he had sent, before we even on the call, he had sent like designs for Clark and Lois and Superman. And I was like, oh, dude, yeah, this is going to be awesome. Like he really gets that kind of the look that I already had in my mind of this like mix of the animated series with this very iconic look, even like a little bit of Max Fleischer cartoons. And then you get Jamal Campbell on top of that. And it's still his, you know, like you can see those influences, but it's still his. And then, yeah, this just kind of big, bulky farm boy. You know, you look at like when Tim Sal drew him in Fall Seasons, that like bulky kind of vibe. And he really went for that. And you can really see it. And there's certain parts of it. There are times I told him, I'm like, oh, I can see the influences that you have like absorbed from different stuff. And yeah, Jamal, I mean, it's been awesome working with Jamal on this book. Like they get it. And, you know, it makes me feel really confident in the scripts that I'm writing, and knowing that they're just really going to take what I'm putting on the table and then elevating it so much. Like it's been great. Jamal's a genius. Like there's little stuff. So like in issue 1, and I've had this before, like other interviews and stuff like that, but in issue 1, there's a part where like Clark's on top of the Daily Planet, you know, and he has like a hat on, he has the headphones on and everything. And then when him and Lois are talking, she takes the hat off, and then when they kiss, but then Jimmy jumps on the roof, she puts the hat on herself in that moment, you know, kind of embarrassing, like, whoop. And that was it in the script, like her putting the hat on, right? Like her taking the hat off, all that stuff. That was all Jamal. And I was like, I remember that was the first page he sent in, was the kiss page. It was the very first page I ever saw. And I just remember being like, oh, dude, yes, this is it. Like this person knew how to take the story and add to it. It was just so good. That page is incredible.
It speaks so much to like Superman as a whole. Like that page, I'm looking at it right now, is just unbelievable.
Yeah. It was like, got every page that comes in, I'm like, it's
beautiful.
Yeah. Like
I clearly loved this book. PKJ's Superman is where I actually got into the character, like where I finally felt like I understood Superman's appeal. Like I was like, I'm with Clark forever now. Now,
I think
issue. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to get into issue 2. What were you going to say?
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, I think that's one thing that's been really great about working with Philip is that like we're both bringing different sensibilities to it. Like we're not duplicating each other, but we're also not contradicting each other. Yeah, and I think that's why it's a good that like he's on action, I'm on this, because it gives you this kind of you could read one or the other if you wanted, but if you read both, you're getting a bigger picture. But it allows us to just like kind of I don't know. I feel like it's a really good time to be a Superman fan. I keep saying that, but it's like I really believe it because it's like between us and then the stuff that Tom Taylor is going to be doing in John's book, and then we have Steelworks has been announced, right? So it's like that was on so I'm not telling you anything.
I don't think we know who's writing it.
Yeah, but there's stuff out there, and you can tell the stuff that we're building toward is really cool. And Paul Kaminsky, who's the editor, Superman is his favorite character of all time. Like it's very important to him. And so when he got on the job, he was just like, "This is it." He was like, I have to make this work. And you can tell, you can see that passion.
Yeah, I was excited when he got onto these Superman books. So with that, you're bringing new characters. And if you've been on Twitter, you know how excited people are for Marilyn Midnight. Without any spoilers or anything, what were some of the inspirations for her as a character with you and Campbell? Like what did you want to make in your first Superman?
It's hard because I don't want to get too deep into her, only because I don't want to ruin like her origin. But it's like I really thought a lot about her, like who she was before she took on this role. For me, it started off where I was like, oh, what is Metropolis like at night? Right? Like, what is Metropolis like at night? And so I started off with that because with Clark, so much of Clark and so much of Superman is during the day, right? Like the sun, everything, And so I was like, there's this nightlife in Metropolis. And I was like, what if there's been a hero at night this whole time? We just never really knew. We never really saw them, but they've been able to kind of operate in the shadows because they're at night. And then I started just kind of going into different ideas for them and what they were like and how long they have been operating in Metropolis, which they've been operating in Metropolis for a very long time. Some of the stuff with this book has been that, like, it's almost like Metropolis wasn't created the day that Clark Kent got there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it has this history. And also we know that Lex Luthor was there for almost 10 years before Clark got there. And I was like, I want to really dive into that. This idea that there was like Metropolis had heroes and villains before Superman got there. And he didn't know. Like he hasn't known this whole time. And so I wanted to play around with that. And that was part of her creation. And then I went to Jamal. Jamal and I started talking, and I was like, well, here's the stuff that I'm thinking about her origin. Here's the stuff that I'm thinking about where she's from. And then, there's little teases of stuff. And obviously you've read number 2. So, there's like a Western kind of vibe to her. And then issue 1, there's that tease of Clark riding a horse. So there's obviously like something going on involving a Western at some point or another. And so I went to Jamal, and Jamal and I were going back and forth. And actually, what was funny is we could not figure out her name. And we had a different name for her at one point. We both didn't like it. And we had a call, and it was like this. It was a very funny call because we're sitting there both just like quiet, just thinking on a Zoom, just being like, And then that night I was texting Jamal, and I was like, well, here's what I'm thinking. And then Jamal was like, well, actually, if there's kind of like a Western vibe to her, then it's Marilyn Moonlight, because Moonlight. So Marilyn Moonlight made sense. It sounded kind of a Western name. And I'm like, oh, the Legend of Marilyn. That's okay. I was like, the Legend of Marilyn Moonlight is 100% a Western legend. and then I was like, oh, it's done now. This is it. And then of course, like the design had already come in. The design of this sort of like this vibe of a bit of a Western, a little bit of modern. It was a lot of back and forth, but we actually didn't do too many rounds of designs because Jamal just like got it so much like right out the gate, the idea of what she looked like with the hat and without and stuff.
She's so visually striking on the page. Oh, yeah. I'm so excited for people to get to see her.
No, she's really cool. She's only going to be, it's going to be interesting with her because it's like, she's this building mystery that we're going to be seeding. And so it's not going to be this thing where it's like, oh, here's the whole thing immediately. You get the little tease of her in 2, and then you'll see more of her later on. Like we'll tease something in 5, and then we're gonna build this thing to her with her. And again, there's all kinds of stuff that Clark didn't really know. It's like, I mean, even look at Gotham, right? Like Alan Scott lived in Gotham before Bruce did.
Yeah,
and it's like that's the kind of stuff I was looking at where I'm like, Metropolis has been around for a while, and it's like. You may tell me it's just been Lex and Superman this whole time. But like obviously there's Kara and there was there was Guardian and we had the Newsboy Legion and stuff like that. There's been stuff going on. But I was like, yo, listen, like I think there's other stuff here. And that's kind of what also with the tease with Lex, where Lex says in the first issue, where he's just like, you're not facing your villains, you're facing my villains. And you find out that Lex had all this stuff we never knew about, like from before Superman got there, but also there's other stuff that he's done. Some good and some bad that Clark did not know about, and now it's going to bite everybody in the ass. That's kind of a thing that you'll see throughout the book, and it's frustrating for Clark because it's kind of like, Lex is like, I want to help, and for Lex, he says it in the first issue. Clark does, where he's just like, I feel like the only person I ever gave up on is Lex Luthor, and I think because Clark always wants to see the best in everybody, right? He wants to see the best in everybody, and he knows that everyone can do good and be good. And be the best versions of themselves. That's what he wants. But he looks at Lex and he's like, I can't see it. And I think for someone like Superman, it bothers him that he can't see it. And so that plays into the story, especially in the first 3 issues. But then it's also frustrating for Clark to be like, you're saying you want to help, but I'm finding out like every day there's something else that I find out about. And that's something that we play with down the line. And there's some fun stuff coming with the dynamic between Lex and Clark and kind of this antagonistic sort of thing. And it'll be really interesting.
I'm so pumped for what's to come. So with that, we're also getting Green Arrow. And it's been a while since we've seen a Green Arrow book. For you, if you had just like 3 essential reads for Green Arrow, what would you tell people to pick up?
Oh, I mean, there's the obvious stuff. There's the obvious stuff. Like you got to read like Longbow Hunter.
What are yours though? Like even if they're not essential, I want to hear what like you think. What you would hand someone.
I was a really big fan. Like listen, I was a really big fan of Quiver. Like I really liked that book at that time period. Like Kevin Smith. I really liked it. I mean, obviously I reread it because of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I really liked the Kevin Smith. And the Brad Meltzer, I think the Brad Meltzer stuff is great. Like Archer's Quest is really good, and I really like when John Bennett was in the book. Like I mean, that stuff is really good. And when it was Green Arrow and Black Canary later, like I liked all of that. But also, obviously you could tell from Robin, like I love Connor Hawke.
Yeah, I was gonna say
that book was real good. And it's like Green Arrow 100 is a sad issue, but it's a good issue. Where angels fear to tread. It's a great comic and. I'm trying to think of some other ones. I mean, but I always like the supporting cast too. Like you go in there and you look at stuff. I was talking about this with somebody else earlier who's a Green Arrow fan, and we were talking about this, and we were talking about Roy, and I was like, the voice of Roy in my head is like not just the Roy miniseries, but when he was in Titans. Even when he was Arsenal, like later on when he was wearing like the sunglasses and the yellow shoulder pad outfit thing. Like that voice. But there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, Hard Traveling Heroes is one that I always kind of gravitate toward. And, I mean, obviously that's iconic. There's stuff there's stuff during because here's the thing. Here's the thing about Green Arrow. Like I've loved Green Arrow since I was a little kid, and that was like always a thing for me wanting to write that book. And like I still have my Superpowers Green Arrow toy, and I have like an original like Darwin Cook drawing of Green Arrow they did for me, and I have a framed like cell, like animation cell from Super Friends, and
wow,
like he's just a character that I have always really liked and I always wanted to write, and so it's like it's a character I've basically been reading my entire life. I have some blind spots, like, and I was definitely the kind of Green Arrow fan that I was just like excited he had a title half the time, like how you are that sometimes like you like a character and you're like, I don't care if it's good or bad, I'm glad there's a book, I'm glad I'm reading it monthly, But I have
a Resurrection Man fan, so yeah.
Oh, dude, I love Resurrection Man.
I know.
Yeah. You got two books.
I know. And he's made appearances recently, and there's other characters connected to him now. So
yeah, there are people who really like. There are people.
Mitch is coming back.
Yeah, there are some writers who love Resurrection Man, but yeah.
So with that, there was this teaser image with the whole Arrow family. Yeah. And a lot of people were excited to see this one character, Mia Durden, who hasn't been seen for over 10 years or something like that. Over a decade.
We had her in Dark Crisis briefly. And so we definitely teased that she is out there. But yeah, go ahead.
What kind of plans do you have for her? Because you're clearly a Green Arrow fan. How much do you want to involve the character like this?
Well, with her in particular, like our first 3 issues, we really mostly focus on a particular group of Green Arrow characters, and then it starts to go out there. And it's like with her, she is going to have a role in the later issues of the first 6 issues. My hope is that sales on these first 6 issues are so strong that we're able to get extended the same way Poison Ivy was extended, and then I'm able to do even more with Mia. I'm able to do more with Red Canary. I'm able to really get in there, get a lot more in there with Shazire. Like there's a lot of stuff I want to do, but I have a lot of work to do before I can get there. And when you read issue 1, you're going to see, it's like, this book is interesting to me because like Superman was built to be super accessible. You could not have read a Superman comic book your entire life, read that book. You could have not, if you haven't been paying attention to DC and sat down and read it, I try to make sure, here, this is for you, right? Like you can do this. If you have or haven't read Superman, here it is. Green Arrow was a different beast because to me, Green Arrow was like, this is for Green Arrow fans. And it was definitely like, I try to make sure it's accessible. I'm trying to make sure, but there's definitely pieces of it where I'm like, there are subplots that are like 15 years old. That I'm like, I have to resolve these. I have to deal with some stuff first. But getting to Mia, like, I mean, these first 6 issues to me, like the name of them is Reunion. And that's been my goal is like, by hook or by crook, I'm getting them all back, man. Like, so I'm doing my best.
I'm excited for Green Arrow fans to finally get a book because it's been a while.
Yeah. It has been a while, and if you had asked me a year ago, I'd given up. I'd given up, because it's like I had tried so many times to write Green Arrow, either as a book or even just have him be in one of my books. Like during Rebirth, me and Ben Percy would talk about crossovers. Never happened. Justice League versus Suicide Squad, couldn't make it happen. Like I was always like, I gotta get it. But that's why when I finally got him, it was Justice League 75. And if you read Justice League 75, that's his story. It's his story. Like he's essentially, the beginning and end, and he has the big moment, and he's the one you see die on page. And it kind of broke my heart. It broke my heart, funny. But I was like, but I also knew that was the way to go with it because it was like, I love this character so much that it's like, because I'm always like, listen, I'm always writing for myself. I know it's like, I have this conversation a lot with people about, like, I have to like it. If I don't like it, if I wouldn't be entertained by this, there's a problem. And so when I was working on this one, I really was like, dude, I have to make this something I would enjoy, but also something that would mean something to me. And that's same with Green Arrow #1. Like Green Arrow #1 is like, that's the Green Arrow I wish I had. This is the Green Arrow #1 I wish I had read many times over the last 15 years. And
pumped.
I have like 2 Green Arrow. There are 2 people that work at DC. Well, actually, there's a few. You find out there's a lot of editors and stuff like that really love Green Arrow. But there's 2 editors in particular I know who are really huge Green Arrow fans, and they both read it already, and they both were just like, "Hell yeah, good job! Like you did it." And I was like, "All right, cool. Now I gotta get this. I have to get the sales there so we can extend it. Like that's really the thing. I mean, it's gonna be a fascinating test of like, because a lot of times people get really, really excited on the internet, and then we don't necessarily see it reflected in the sales. So with this one, I'm like, come on, we got to do it this time. Everybody show up. Like you say you love it. You got to buy it. You got to pre-order it. So I'm hoping, like fingers crossed, people get this issue 1, they like it, and we're able to tell more Green Arrow stories afterward.
So I know it's a bit out, and I don't want to get too deep into it because I do want to talk to you in depth about Night Terrors. But from what we know so far, it's like I've seen you describe it as Nightmare versus DC or Freddy versus DC. Incredible.
Freddy versus DC, yeah.
But on one of the covers, you see Sandman, Wesley Dodds, who is one of my two boys. There's Mitch and Wesley. Without spoilers, how much is Sandman a part of this event, or is he just like on the cover and you're trying to hurt me personally?
Oh no, he's all up in it.
Beautiful.
He's in it a lot. I mean, you're gonna be surprised how we get there. But you know, there's a lot with him. Like, I think way more than I originally intended to. You know, I saw some art. I saw some art with him earlier this week, and it just looks so cool. It was so cool, and it was Giuseppe Chemicoli. He drew this page, and he wrote me this whole thing because he also really loved Wesley Dodd, and he wrote me this whole thing after he sent me the page, and he was like, you know, I really love Sandman Mystery Theater, and I really love Guy Davis, and he was like, and I was like, dude, you can see it, like you can tell it. He was like, oh, this is it, and you know, but it's gonna surprise people. I'm gonna tell you this, dude. Like, this book is definitely a horror book. Like, Night Terror it's not only is it a horror event, horror books. Like, I talked to their writers, everybody is really just like, we are making DC into a horror line for 2 months, and obviously, you know, the treaty plays a really important part, and Deadman plays an important part, and so does Wesley Dodds. And it's like, you know, you find out the stuff that's happening now. Obviously, you know, we've already kind of said this in the press release, where like an old Justice League villain dies, and that's kind of what triggers a lot of this stuff. But it's also connected to an old Wesley Dodd case, and so that's a piece of the puzzle. And then it's like, but also this book, as much as it is horror, it is also going to trip people out, I think, in how like weird this book can be. I mean, it's going to be horror, it's going to be weird, it's going to surprise people, I think, but it's also a little bit black humor. You know, like, I love when there's like black humor in my horror. You know, I'm very much like a Sam Raimi, like Evil Dead guy. Like, there's an Evil Dead homage in the first issue, and you know, I really love a lot of that kind of stuff. The first issue, we do the whole, like, you know, the fast zooming where somebody's getting chased thing. Yeah, we do that in the first issue. Yeah, we did the first issue. So I love stuff like that. And so I was like, okay, like, this is the kind of stuff that I want us to be doing here. And it's like, I think it's not like Dark Crisis at all. It is definitely like, it's going to be and because we're dealing with nightmares, you know, it's like, and nightmares can be trippy, right? They don't make sense all the time, you know? And so it's like, there's definitely like a lot of really weird, crazy stuff. And I think when the art starts coming out more and more, and you start seeing where it's going, and it's like, yeah, there's a part early on where Bruce is in the nightmare world in an alley, and like giant pearls are chasing him down the alley, like just giant like Indiana Jones style pearls are coming at him. So I'm having fun, but yeah, Wesley Dodds is definitely in it.
Thank you.
I think people will. He's really interesting to write, you know, because it's like, oh, I can't get into that. I feel like you'll see like how he is in it is going to surprise people.
I'm so pumped. But Joshua, thank you for doing another deep dive into the DC universe with me. Make sure you're picking up Superman. Make sure you pick up Green Arrow, especially in April. Make sure you pick up Joshua's other books, like Dark Ride from Boom, which is a horror carnival book. Incredible.
Yeah, I realized yesterday I still owe you questions from that other interview. I was going through my email and I was like, oh crap, I have to answer those questions. But
it's okay.
As Nick knows, as DC knows, I sometimes am slow on answering emails.
It's okay. Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
The Geek Crashers.